My name is Amanda Davis, and I'm 27 years old. I always believed family meant unconditional love and support. That changed the night I overheard my mother whisper to my brother Ryan, "She never says no to family." Those words revealed how they truly saw me, not as a daughter or sister, but as a resource to be exploited. What followed was a betrayal so profound it shattered everything I thought I knew about family. They tried to frame me for their financial crimes. I never imagined I'd be the one to bring my own family down. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Trust me, this story will make you rethink what family really means. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a small town in Oregon where everyone knew everyone else's business. Our house was the blue one on Maple Street, the one with the perfectly manicured lawn and the white picket fence. My mother, Patricia, was obsessed with appearances. She wanted the world to see us as the perfect American family, but behind closed doors, the reality was very different. From my earliest memories, it was clear that my brother Ryan was the golden child. 3 years older than me, he could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. When he broke my science project the night before it was due, Mom told me I shouldn't have left it where he could reach it. When he took my birthday money to buy video games, she said I needed to learn to share. Every achievement of mine was minimized, while Ryan's smallest accomplishments were celebrated like national holidays. "Family comes first, Amanda," my mother would say whenever I protested the unfair treatment. "One day you'll understand what that means." I understood it meant I was expected to sacrifice. When I was 17, I received a scholarship to attend Columbia University in New York. It was my dream to study finance in the big city, far away from our small town. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, my mother had already launched her campaign to keep me close to home. "Your father and I are getting older, Amanda. We need help with the family business. Ryan has his football career to think about. You've always been the responsible one." The family business was a small accounting firm my father had started. Despite my protests, I ended up enrolling in the state university 40 minutes from home. I lived in the dorms but drove back every weekend to help with bookkeeping and client management. My scholarship money went toward Ryan's college fund since his football scholarship didn't cover everything. I majored in accounting, following in my father's footsteps as expected. When Dad passed away during my junior year from a sudden heart attack, the expectation that I would step up became even stronger. "We're counting on you," Mom said at the funeral, squeezing my hand while Ryan sobbed dramatically beside her. I noticed he had time to recover by the after-funeral reception, where he charmed distant relatives with stories that positioned him as Dad's favorite. After graduation, I got a job at a respected accounting firm in Portland. It was a 2-hour drive from Oak Ridge, far enough to have some independence, but close enough to drive home when the inevitable family emergencies arose. And they arose frequently. There was the time Aunt Judith needed round-the-clock care after her hip replacement. Ryan was too busy with work to help, so I took 2 weeks of my precious vacation time. The time cousin Ethan needed a place to stay just for a few days, that turned into 3 months on my sofa. The countless times my mother called with computer problems that required immediate attention. And the money. God, the money. $5,000 for Ryan's car repair. $3,000 for Mom's new roof. $2,000 for cousin Sarah's destination wedding gift because we need to show up as a family. My apartment became the family storage unit. "Just until we find a place for it," Mom would say as she dropped off boxes of family heirlooms and old photo albums. My spare bedroom became everyone's crash pad. My vacation days were never my own. My best friend Megan was the first to point out how unhealthy the situation was. "They're using you, Amanda," she said one night over wine after I had to cancel our plans because Ryan needed me to pick up his kids from school. "You're not responsible for holding your entire family together." "They're going through a rough patch," I defended, though even I didn't believe it anymore. The rough patch had lasted my entire adult life. The turning point should have been the business loan. Ryan had this brilliant idea to open a sports bar. He needed $30,000 for the initial investment. My mother suggested he ask me. "You've always been so good with money, honey," she said. "And family invests in family." Against my better judgment and my financial advisor's explicit warning, I emptied my savings account to help Ryan start his business. The sports bar lasted 6 months before it closed due to mismanagement. Ryan blamed the location, the economy, the weather, everything except his own poor planning and tendency to drink the inventory. The money was gone. My hard-earned savings, the down payment for the house I'd been dreaming of, vanished along with Ryan's business. When I tentatively asked about repayment, my mother was shocked. "He lost everything in that business, Amanda. How can you be so insensitive? He's your brother." That was when I realized I had a serious problem. I was caught in a pattern of self-sacrifice that had been ingrained in me since childhood. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who never said no to family. And my family was perfectly happy to keep it that way. But something was changing inside me. A slow-burning resentment had begun to simmer beneath my carefully maintained exterior. I began to wonder what my life could look like if I put myself first for once. I began to long for boundaries. What I didn't know then was that my desire for independence would soon be met with the ultimate betrayal. The people who were supposed to love me most in the world were about to show me exactly how far they would go to maintain their control. The first time I tried to establish a boundary, you would have thought I had committed high treason. It was a simple request: "Please call before coming over to my apartment." My mother acted like I had asked her to cut off her right arm. "I didn't realize I needed an appointment to see my own daughter," she said, her voice dripping with hurt. "I gave birth to you, Amanda. I changed your diapers. But I guess that doesn't earn me the right to stop by when I'm in the area." The guilt trip worked as it always did. I backpedaled immediately, assuring her she was always welcome. The boundary dissolved before it had even formed. The pattern continued. Any attempt to carve out space for myself was met with emotional manipulation or outright anger. When I suggested that Ryan could help with Mom's taxes that year, he claimed he was too busy with his new job as a sales representative for a local brewery. When I mentioned that I couldn't afford to loan any more money, my mother reminded me that family takes care of family. Then I met Michael. He was a graphic designer I encountered while working on a marketing campaign for my firm. Tall, with kind brown eyes and an easy laugh, he saw something in me that I had forgotten existed. When we started dating, I felt like I could breathe again. Michael valued my opinions, respected my time, and thought I was funny, a revelation, considering my family rarely listened to anything I had to say. Of course, my family immediately saw Michael as a threat. My mother started calling more frequently, often with emergencies that interrupted our dates. Ryan would show up unannounced when he knew Michael would be over, claiming he needed immediate help with some financial document. They began a subtle campaign to monopolize my time and drive a wedge between us. But Michael was perceptive. One night, after I had cut our dinner short because my mother claimed she was locked out of her email account, he gently took my hands across the table. "Amanda, I need to tell you something," he said, his eyes serious. "I'm concerned about your relationship with your family. They seem to demand a lot from you without giving much in return." My instinct was to defend them, but the words caught in my throat.
Deep down, I knew he was right.
"They're just dependent on me," I said weakly. "They don't mean any harm." "Intention doesn't change impact," Michael replied. "You're exhausted all the time. You're putting your career at risk with all the last-minute emergencies. And I rarely see you truly relaxed and happy except when we're far away from your phone." His observations hit home, but years of conditioning were hard to break. Still, Michael's perspective gave me a new lens through which to view my family dynamics. I began to notice patterns I had previously accepted as normal. The tension came to a head that summer when I had planned a week-long vacation to Cancun with Michael. I had saved for months, booked the time off work 3 months in advance, and was looking forward to my first real vacation in years. 2 days before we were set to leave, Ryan called. "Amanda, I need a huge favor," he said, his voice carrying that familiar mix of charm and desperation. "Melissa and I are having some issues, and she's taking the kids to her mother's for the week. I have this work conference I can't miss. Is there any way you could watch Zach and Emma?"
My heart sank.
His children, while adorable, were 5 and 7 years old and required constant supervision. Ryan, I'm leaving for Mexico in 2 days. I've had this planned for months. Can't you reschedule? This is an emergency, sis. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. When I hesitated, he added, Mom said you'd probably help out. She always says family can count on you. That familiar pressure built in my chest. The expectation. The obligation. The knowledge that saying no would trigger a family crisis. Let me talk to Michael, I said finally. Michael was understanding, but disappointed. It's your decision, Amanda. But think about what message this sends to your family and to yourself. In the end, I canceled the trip. Michael went with a friend from his office instead, while I spent the week watching Ryan's children. The cancellation fees cost me nearly $1,000. Ryan didn't offer to compensate me, and he returned a day late, offering only a casual thanks for pitching in as he collected his kids. It was during that week that the pivotal moment occurred. I had taken the children to my mother's house for dinner. After putting them to bed in the guest room, I headed back to the kitchen to help with dishes. As I approached, I heard my mother and Ryan talking in hushed tones. I paused in the hallway, just out of sight. I feel bad about her vacation, Ryan was saying. Maybe I should have tried harder to find another sitter. Don't be ridiculous, my mother replied. Amanda understands her responsibilities. She never says no to family. That's just who she is. The words hit me like a physical blow. She never says no to family. Not because I was loving or generous, but because I was useful. Because I was reliable. Because I was expected to sacrifice without complaint. In that moment, standing in my mother's dimly lit hallway with the scent of apple pie still lingering in the air, something crystallized within me. I saw with perfect clarity how my family viewed me, not as an individual with my own needs and desires, but as a resource to be tapped whenever necessary. I must have made a sound, because the conversation abruptly stopped. I composed myself and entered the kitchen as if I hadn't heard a thing. But inside, everything had changed. Over the next few months, I began to notice more red flags. Ryan's financial situation seemed increasingly desperate. He would make offhand comments about bill collectors calling. He leased a new car he clearly couldn't afford. When I cautiously asked how he was managing, he became defensive. Not everyone can be as perfect with money as you, Amanda, he snapped. Some of us have real problems. Around the same time, I noticed items in my apartment being moved. At first, I dismissed it as forgetfulness. Surely I had left those financial statements on the desk, not in the drawer. But then my passport wasn't where I always kept it. My social security card, which I stored in a locked box, was slightly out of place. Following Michael's advice, I began documenting these odd occurrences. I started keeping a journal of every time my family asked for money, help, or time. The entries were alarmingly frequent. I also noted the increasing urgency in Ryan's requests and my mother's not-so-subtle hints about family loyalty. At family gatherings, the tension was palpable. I was less immediately compliant, taking time to consider requests before agreeing. This new hesitation was met with surprise and increasing pressure. My mother's comments became more pointed. Family is all we have in the end, Amanda, she would say, usually within earshot of relatives who would nod in solemn agreement. Blood is thicker than water. I began to dread those gatherings, those guilt-laden statements about duty and obligation. The knot in my stomach grew tighter with each passive-aggressive comment, each expectant look, each unspoken demand. What I didn't realize was that the tension was building toward something far worse than family disagreements. The comments, the missing documents, Ryan's financial desperation, they were all warning signs of a storm that was about to break over my life with devastating force. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came in the form of a credit card statement. I've always been methodical about my finances, a necessity when you're constantly being asked to bail out family members. I review every statement line by line, track every expense in a spreadsheet, and know exactly where my money goes. So when I opened my credit card statement and saw a $10,000 charge from a jewelry store I'd never visited, I knew immediately something was wrong. I called the credit card company and reported the fraudulent charge, assuming my card had been compromised in a data breach. 2 days later, I received a call from a loan officer at a bank I didn't use, asking about my application for a $40,000 personal loan. I hadn't applied for any loan. There must be some mistake, I told the officer. I never submitted an application. Well, someone did, he replied. They had your social security number, date of birth, employment information, everything. A cold dread settled in my stomach. This wasn't a random identity theft. This was targeted. Someone with access to my personal information was using my identity. I spent the next day placing fraud alerts on my credit reports, filing a police report, and trying to untangle what was happening. When I pulled my credit report, I discovered multiple recent inquiries from various lenders. Someone had been busy trying to open accounts in my name. My first thought wasn't my family. Despite everything, I couldn't imagine Ryan or my mother doing something so destructive. I suspected it might be one of the many cousins or extended family members who had crashed at my apartment over the years. I called Michael in a panic, and he came over immediately. As I showed him the credit report, his face grew increasingly concerned. Amanda, who has access to your personal documents? Your social security card, birth certificate, financial statements. No one, I said automatically. Then I remembered the misplaced items in my apartment. At least no one should. Who has a key to your apartment? He asked. The question hit me hard. My mother had a key for emergencies. Ryan had borrowed mine several times and could easily have made a copy. You need to check your important documents, Michael advised. Right now. We went through my filing cabinet and the locked box where I kept my most important papers. My social security card was there, but my birth certificate was missing. Several bank statements were gone. My passport was still there, but it had been moved from its usual place. I think you should set up a camera, Michael suggested. If someone is coming into your apartment and going through your things, you need to know who it is. The idea that I needed to surveil my own home to protect myself from my family was heartbreaking, but I knew Michael was right. That weekend, he helped me install a small, discreet security camera in my living room, angled toward the entrance and the desk where I kept my financial documents. For a week, nothing happened. Then, on Tuesday, I received a notification that the camera had detected motion while I was at work. With shaking hands, I opened the app and watched the footage. The video showed my brother Ryan entering my apartment using a key. He moved purposefully to my desk, opening drawers and rifling through papers. He spent nearly 20 minutes searching before finding what appeared to be a bank statement, which he photographed with his phone. Before leaving, he checked my bedroom and bathroom as well. I felt physically ill. The brother I had supported and defended all my life was sneaking into my apartment to steal my financial information.
But why?
What was he planning? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next day, another camera alert showed my mother entering my apartment. She went straight to my mailbox key hanging by the door, took it, and left. Less than 10 minutes later, she returned, replaced the key, and left again, this time carrying what looked like several envelopes. She was stealing my mail. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered more evidence. I set up a second camera facing my desk and filing cabinet. I created a fake bank statement showing a large savings account and left it visible on my desk. Sure enough, Ryan returned and took photos of it. I checked my credit report daily, watching with horror as new inquiries appeared. Someone had applied for a mortgage in my name, a car loan, another credit card. Then came the most damning evidence of all. I set up alerts for my email account and discovered someone had accessed it from an unrecognized device. I changed my password immediately and checked my sent folder. There I found emails I had never written, sent to various financial institutions. In these emails, I authorized my brother Ryan to discuss my accounts. There were also emails between me and Ryan discussing how I had agreed to co-sign for his loans because he was helping me invest in a business opportunity. It was a paper trail designed to make it look like I had willingly participated in whatever scheme they were creating. The final piece of the puzzle came when I discovered an email exchange between Ryan and my mother. Ryan had forwarded an application rejection from a loan company, adding, "They're getting suspicious about all the recent applications. We need to move faster." My mother's reply chilled me to the bone. "Don't worry. If anything goes wrong, Amanda's credit is perfect. We'll say she authorized everything." Who would believe she didn't want to help her struggling brother? Worst case, she takes the hit for a while. She'll understand it's for family. They weren't just stealing my identity for financial gain. They were setting me up to take the fall if their scheme fell apart. I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal, feeling a surreal detachment. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were willing to destroy my financial future, my reputation, possibly even send me to jail for fraud, all because I was the reliable one, the one who never says no to family. The depth of the betrayal was unfathomable. This wasn't just taking advantage of my generosity. This was calculated, premeditated harm. This was seeing me not as a daughter or sister, but as a convenient scapegoat. The heartbreak I felt was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I had given everything to my family, my time, my money, my opportunities. And in return, they had plotted my destruction. I called Michael, my voice shaking so badly he could barely understand me. When he arrived, I showed him everything I had discovered. His face hardened with each new piece of evidence. "Amanda," he said finally, "this is criminal. This is identity theft and fraud. You need to report them." The thought of reporting my own mother and brother to the police made me physically ill. Despite everything, they were still my family. I still remembered Ryan teaching me to ride a bike, my mother nursing me through childhood illnesses. "Maybe I can talk to them," I suggested weakly. "Maybe they don't understand what they're doing." Michael looked at me with a mixture of compassion and firmness. "They understand exactly what they're doing. The emails prove it. They're counting on your loyalty to let them get away with it." Deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate attempt to exploit my love for them. They had counted on my unwillingness to fight back, my lifetime pattern of putting their needs before my own. For the first time in my life, I was going to have to say no to family. And it was going to cost all of us dearly. I spent the night crying until there were no tears left, just a hollow ache in my chest. By morning, I had reached a strange calm, the kind that comes when you've hit emotional rock bottom and there's nowhere further to fall. Michael stayed with me, sleeping on the couch and checking on me throughout the night. My best friend Megan came over at dawn, bringing coffee and her unwavering support. They sat with me in my living room as I tried to process the unimaginable betrayal. "I keep thinking there must be some explanation," I said, staring at my untouched coffee. "Some reason that would make this make sense." "There is an explanation," Megan said gently. "They're selfish people who don't care who they hurt, even their own daughter and sister." "But they're my family," I whispered, the word catching in my throat. "Biology doesn't give anyone the right to destroy your life," Michael responded, taking my hand. "What they're doing is criminal, Amanda. It's not a family disagreement. It's fraud." I knew they were right, but I needed to hear the truth from my mother and brother's own mouths. I needed to give them one chance to explain, to apologize, to make it right. I decided to confront them at the weekly family dinner my mother hosted every Sunday. That Sunday was the longest day of my life. I got dressed carefully, as if preparing for battle. In a way, I brought copies of the evidence, not everything, but enough to prove I knew what they'd done. Michael and Megan wanted to come with me, but I knew this was something I had to do alone. When I arrived at my mother's house, the familiar scent of her pot roast filled the air. Ryan's car was already in the driveway. My hands trembled as I knocked on the door of the house I had grown up in, suddenly feeling like a stranger. My mother answered with her usual smile, kissing my cheek as if everything was normal, as if she hadn't been systematically destroying my financial life. "You're late, honey," she said. "Ryan and Melissa are already here with the kids." The normalcy was surreal. Ryan sat at the dining table, helping his son with a toy. He looked up and waved casually, the same brother who had rifled through my personal documents just days before. Dinner was a bizarre experience. We ate pot roast and discussed the weather while my heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. My mother asked about work. Ryan talked about his kids' school activities. It was as if I had imagined the entire thing, as if the evidence sitting in my purse didn't exist. Finally, as my mother served apple pie for dessert, I couldn't maintain the charade any longer. "I know what you've been doing," I said quietly, looking between my mother and Ryan. I know you've been using my identity to take out loans. The room went silent. Ryan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. My mother's hand stilled on the pie server. What are you talking about, Amanda? My mother asked, her voice carefully measured. I pulled out the folder of evidence and placed it on the table. I have footage of both of you entering my apartment when I wasn't home. I have copies of emails between you discussing how to use my credit. I have proof of loan applications submitted in my name. Ryan's face flushed red. You've been spying on us? What kind of person puts cameras up to spy on their own family? The audacity of his response stunned me momentarily. He was trying to make me the villain. The kind of person who notices her personal documents being moved around, I replied, finding strength in the absurdity of his accusation. The kind of person who gets calls about loan applications she never submitted. My mother placed a hand on Ryan's arm, silencing him. She turned to me with the expression she'd used throughout my childhood when I was being difficult. Amanda, sweetie, I think you're confused. Ryan has been having some financial problems, yes, and we may have borrowed your financial statements to use as templates for his loan applications. But everything we did was to help the family. Templates. I echoed in disbelief. You stole my identity. You took out loans and credit cards in my name without my knowledge or permission. We were going to pay everything back. Ryan interjected. It was just temporary until my commission check comes in. You're making it sound like we're criminals. What you did, I.S. criminal, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. It's identity theft and fraud. My mother's expression hardened. Lower your voice, Amanda. The children will hear you. That was when I realized they weren't going to admit what they'd done. They were going to gaslight me, minimize their actions, make me seem hysterical. I have proof, I insisted, tapping the folder. I have everything. The loan applications. The emails where you discuss setting me up to take the hit if things went wrong. A flash of recognition crossed my mother's face. She knew exactly which email I was referring to. Her strategy shifted. Ryan has 3 children, Amanda, she said, her voice taking on the martyred tone I knew so well. His marriage is struggling. He needed help. That's what family does. We help each other through hard times. By committing fraud? I asked incredulously. By doing whatever it takes, she snapped, her composed facade cracking. Ryan has a family to support. What do you have? A boyfriend who will probably be gone next year, and a job you care too much about. Ryan has real responsibilities. Her words hit like physical blows. In her eyes, my life was disposable. My future was an acceptable sacrifice for Ryan's comfort. Ryan, sensing his mother's approach wasn't working, tried a different angle. Sis, I was desperate. I got in over my head with some debts. I was going to pay everything back before you even noticed. You have perfect credit. You could weather a few late payments. I could lose my house. So you decided to risk sending me to jail? I asked, my voice breaking. It wouldn't have come to that, my mother interjected. Family protects family. If it had gone badly, we would have figured something out. Like what? I demanded. What was your plan if I was arrested for fraud? Neither of them answered, which was an answer in itself. They had no plan because they hadn't considered the consequences for me. I was collateral damage in their scheme. I trusted you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I have done everything for this family. I have given up opportunities, relationships, my savings, everything you ever asked for. And this is how you repay me. Don't be so dramatic, Ryan said dismissively. No one got hurt. I got hurt, I shouted, finally losing the tight control I'd maintained. I got hurt every time you took advantage of me. I got hurt when you decided my future was less important than yours. I got hurt when my own mother suggested I should take the fall for crimes I didn't commit because my life matters less than yours. My outbursts silenced the room. Even the children, playing in the adjacent living room, went quiet. My mother recovered first. See what you've done? She hissed. You've upset everyone with your selfishness. That word, selfishness, after everything they had done, was the final straw. A lifetime of suppressed anger and hurt boiled over. Selfishness? I repeated. I have given everything to this family. Everything. And it was never enough. You've been bleeding me dry for years, and when there was nothing left to take, you decided to steal my identity. And you have the audacity to call me selfish. I stood up, gathering my evidence. I'm done. I'm done being your personal aim. I'm done being the reliable one you can exploit. I'm done sacrificing my life for people who see me as nothing but a resource. My mother's expression shifted from anger to panic as she realized I was serious. Amanda, wait.
Let's talk about this.
We're family. We can work it out. You should have thought about that before you committed multiple felonies in my name, I replied, a strange calm replacing my earlier fury. As I turned to leave, Ryan grabbed my arm. You can't report us, he said, his voice low and threatening. It would destroy this family. Think about my kids. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the charismatic golden boy my mother had always favored, but a selfish man who had never faced consequences for his actions. You should have thought about your kids before you decided to commit fraud, I said, pulling my arm from his grasp. Whatever happens next is on you, not me. As I walked to my car, my mother followed me out to the driveway. Amanda, please, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. We're your family. Blood is thicker than water. You can't do this to us. I paused at my car door and looked at the woman who had raised me, who had shaped me into someone whose worth was measured by what I could give rather than who I was. You did this to yourselves, I said quietly. And you did this to me. Family isn't supposed to hurt each other like this. As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt something unexpected beneath the pain and betrayal. Relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself. I had said no. I called Michael from the car, barely able to speak through my tears. He met me in my apartment, and I collapsed into his arms as soon as he opened the door. I couldn't do it, I sobbed. I couldn't report them. They're still my family. Michael held me tight. It's your decision, Amanda. But remember, they were willing to let you go to jail for their crimes. They were counting on your love for them to shield them from consequences. His words crystallized something inside me. They had counted on my forgiveness, my compliance, my unwillingness to fight back. They had weaponized my love against me. In that moment, lying in Michael's arms with tears streaming down my face, I made the hardest decision of my life. I would no longer be the person who never said no to family. I would no longer set myself on fire to keep others warm. I need to call my lawyer, I said, sitting up and wiping my tears. And then I need to call the police. Michael nodded, a mixture of sadness and pride in his eyes. I'll be with you every step of the way. That night, as I made the calls that would forever change my family, I felt a strange combination of heartbreak and liberation. The Amanda who had always said yes, who had prioritized everyone else's needs above her own, was gone. In her place was a woman who had finally learned her own worth. The next morning, I met with Diane Freeman, a lawyer who specialized in identity theft cases. I brought all my evidence. The video footage, the emails, the fraudulent loan applications, the credit reports showing inquiries I never made. She reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing increasingly grave. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of identity theft I've seen, she said finally. And unfortunately, it's not uncommon for family members to be the perpetrators. They have access, knowledge of your personal information, and worst of all, they know how to manipulate you emotionally. What should I do? I asked, still torn despite my resolve the night before. Legally speaking, you have several options, Diane explained. You can report the identity theft to the police and press charges. You can file a civil lawsuit to recover damages. Or you can try to resolve it privately, though I don't recommend that route given the extent of what they've done. If I report them, I asked hesitantly, what would happen to them? Identity theft is a felony, she said bluntly. Your brother and mother could face significant jail time, especially given the amount of money involved and the premeditated nature of the fraud. There would also be fines and restitution. The thought of my mother in jail made my stomach turn. But the alternative, allowing them to destroy my financial future and possibly send me to jail for their crimes, was unthinkable. I need time to think, I said. Diane nodded sympathetically. Take the time you need, but not too much. Every day that passes allows them to potentially do more damage. At minimum, we should file identity theft reports with the credit bureaus and financial institutions immediately. I spent the next week in a daze, going through the motions at work while my personal life imploded. Michael and Megan took turns staying with me, concerned about my emotional state. I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. The betrayal consumed me. Meanwhile, the evidence continued to mount. I discovered Ryan had opened 3 more credit accounts in my name. My mother had redirected some of my mail to a P.O. box. They were accelerating their efforts, perhaps sensing that I was onto them. The tipping point came when I received a call from a detective investigating a fraud case. Someone matching Ryan's description had attempted to take out a loan using my identification at a bank where the loan officer had become suspicious and reported it. The detective wanted to know if I had authorized anyone to use my ID. I realized then that it wasn't just about me anymore. Ryan and my mother were committing crimes that would eventually be discovered with or without my report. The only question was whether I would be implicated in their scheme. That evening, I met with Diane again and made my decision. I want to file a police report, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And I want to do whatever is necessary to protect myself. Diane nodded approvingly. That's the right decision, difficult as it is. Here's what we're going to do. Under her guidance, I implemented a comprehensive strategy. First, we filed detailed reports with the police, the Federal Trade Commission, and all 3 credit bureaus. I provided the video evidence, emails, and documentation of every fraudulent account I had discovered. Next, I contacted every financial institution where accounts had been opened in my name, disputing the accounts and providing evidence that they were fraudulent. This was a painstaking process that took weeks, but gradually, the fraudulent accounts were closed and the inquiries removed from my credit report. Diane also advised me to document every interaction with my family from that point forward. If they contact you, she warned, record the conversation if it's legal in your state. Save every text, email, and voicemail. We need to establish a pattern of behavior. The response from my family was swift and predictable. My phone exploded with texts and calls from my mother, alternating between tearful pleas and angry accusations. Ryan left voicemails ranging from apologetic to threatening. Extended family members I hadn't heard from in years suddenly reached out, urging me to work things out within the family. Following Diane's advice, I didn't respond directly to any of them. Instead, I had her send formal letters to both my mother and Ryan, stating that all communication should go through her office and warning them against any further use of my personal information. The investigation revealed that the fraud was even more extensive than I had initially discovered. Ryan had taken out over $120,000 in loans and credit using my identity. He had also used my information as collateral for other loans, putting me at risk for debts I knew nothing about. My mother's involvement was less direct, but equally damning. She had helped Ryan gain access to my apartment, stolen my mail, and most disturbingly, had written emails explicitly discussing how I could take the fall if things went wrong. As the legal process moved forward, I focused on protecting and rebuilding my financial life. I placed extended fraud alerts on my credit reports. I changed all my passwords and security questions. I moved to a new apartment where my family didn't have access. I even changed banks to ensure they couldn't social engineer their way into my accounts using the personal information they knew about me. Through it all, I maintained a strange, detached calm. The initial emotional devastation had given way to a cool, focused determination. I was no longer the Amanda who would sacrifice herself for family harmony. I was someone new, someone who valued herself enough to fight back. 3 months after my initial report, Diane called with news. The district attorney is moving forward with charges against both your brother and mother, she said. Identity theft, fraud, mail theft, and conspiracy. They want to know if you're willing to testify. Despite everything, I hesitated. Testifying would mean publicly declaring that my own family had betrayed me. It would make the break permanent, irrevocable. Take some time to think about it, Diane advised. That night, I received an unexpected visitor. My mother came to my new apartment, somehow having obtained my address. When I opened the door, She burst into tears. "Amanda, please," she sobbed. "You have to drop the charges. Ryan could go to prison. I could go to prison." "Is that what you want? To destroy your family?" I remained in the doorway, not inviting her in. "You are willing to let me go to prison for your crimes," I said quietly. "You said it yourself in those emails. I should take the hit because Ryan has a family and I don't." "I never meant it," she protested. "It was just talk. We were desperate." "So desperate that you were willing to sacrifice me," I replied. "Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? Not just the crime, but the betrayal? You treated me like I wasn't even a person with my own life and future. Like I was just a resource for Ryan to use." Her tears stopped abruptly, and her expression hardened. "You've always been selfish, Amanda. Always thinking about yourself. Ryan needs help. I need help. We're your family. Blood is thicker than water." "That's not even the correct quote," I said, surprising myself with a small laugh. "The full quote is, 'The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb.' It means the exact opposite of how you're using it. It means the relationships we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into." My mother stared at me, uncomprehending. She couldn't understand a worldview where family obligation wasn't the highest value, where her children might have worth beyond what they could provide to her. "I'm going to testify," I said finally. "Not out of revenge, but because you and Ryan need to face consequences for once in your lives. Maybe then you'll understand what you've done. If you do this," she said, her voice taking on a threatening edge, "you'll no longer be my daughter." The words should have devastated me. Instead, I felt an odd sense of peace. "I stopped being your daughter the moment you decided my future was an acceptable sacrifice for Ryan's comfort," I replied. "Goodbye, Mom." As I closed the door on her shocked face, I realized I had just closed a chapter of my life as well. The family I had known was gone. What would replace it remained to be seen, but for the first time, I felt free to discover who I could be without the crushing weight of toxic family obligation. The next day, I called Diane. "I'll testify," I said. "I'm ready to tell the whole truth." The day of Ryan's arraignment was surreal. I sat in the courtroom watching my brother, dressed in a suit that suddenly seemed too large for him, as the charges were read. Identity theft, fraud, mail theft, conspiracy. He pleaded not guilty, avoiding my gaze entirely. My mother's arraignment followed a week later. She had hired a separate attorney who attempted to portray her as an unwitting accomplice manipulated by her son. The strategy didn't work. The emails in which she explicitly discussed using me as a scapegoat made her complicity clear. As the case progressed, I learned more details about their scheme. Ryan had accumulated massive gambling debts, something he had hidden from everyone. His seemingly successful sales career was a facade. He had been fired months earlier for misappropriating company funds. The new car, the family vacations, the expensive gifts for his children, all financed through loans he couldn't repay. When creditors began closing in, he had turned to the easiest target, me. The sister who never said no. The sister with perfect credit and a good job. The sister who could be manipulated through family obligation. My mother had enabled and assisted him every step of the way, not just out of maternal love, but because Ryan's lifestyle maintained the family image she had cultivated for decades. The successful son, the beautiful grandchildren, the nice house in the right neighborhood. These were the markers of the perfect family she had always wanted to project. I was just collateral damage in their quest to maintain appearances. The weeks leading up to the trial were a strange limbo. Extended family members took sides, many rallying around my mother and Ryan. The family narrative quickly became that I was vindictive and unforgiving, that I was blowing a simple misunderstanding out of proportion. Aunt Judith, who I had cared for after her hip replacement, called to berate me. "After everything your mother has done for you, this is how you repay her? By trying to send her to jail? Family forgives, Amanda." Did she forgive me when she decided I should take the fall for her crimes? I asked quietly. Aunt Judith had no answer for that. Others reached out with support. My father's brother, Uncle Robert, who had always been somewhat distant from my mother, called to tell me he was proud of me for standing up for myself. "Your father would have supported you. he said, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. He always worried that Patricia and Ryan took advantage of your good nature. The revelation that my father had seen the dynamic I had only recently recognized was both comforting and painful. I wished he were still alive to help me navigate this terrible situation. As the trial date approached, the prosecutor offered both Ryan and my mother plea deals. Ryan, facing the most serious charges and the strongest evidence, accepted immediately. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of identity theft and fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence of 3 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. My mother, perhaps believing her status as a respected community member would protect her, initially rejected her plea offer. It was only when her attorney showed her the full extent of the evidence against her, including the damning emails, that she reluctantly accepted a deal. 2 years of house arrest, 5 years of probation, and full restitution for her role in the crimes. I attended Ryan's sentencing hearing, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, he finally addressed me directly. "Amanda, I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I got in over my head, and I took advantage of the one person who has always been there for me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I understand what I did." I couldn't tell if his remorse was genuine or just a performance for the judge. Perhaps it was a bit of both. I sat impassively, neither accepting nor rejecting his apology. My mother's sentencing was more difficult. She remained defiant, even as the judge reprimanded her for her role in the conspiracy. "Mrs. Davis, you participated in a scheme to defraud your own daughter and potentially allow her to take the blame for crimes she didn't commit," the judge said sternly. "The court finds your actions particularly troubling given your position of trust as a parent." When allowed to speak, my mother turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Amanda, I did what I thought was best for our family. Someday, when you have children of your own, perhaps you'll understand a mother's love." Her words, intended to evoke sympathy, only highlighted how fundamentally she had failed to grasp the gravity of what she had done. Even now, she was framing her criminal actions as maternal love, her betrayal as family loyalty. After the sentencing, as I left the courthouse, I was confronted by Ryan's wife, Melissa. I had always liked Melissa, had always thought she was too good for my self-centered brother. The stress of the past months had taken a visible toll on her. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. "Are you happy now?" she demanded, her voice tight with anger. "Ryan is going to prison. Your mother is under house arrest. My children don't understand why they can't see their daddy. Is this the justice you wanted?" I looked at the woman whose children I had watched countless times, whose husband had used my identity to finance their lifestyle, and felt a complex mixture of sympathy and resentment. "I didn't want any of this, Melissa," I said honestly. "I didn't want to be defrauded by my own family. I didn't want to discover they were willing to let me go to jail for their crimes. I didn't want to have to rebuild my entire financial life because of what they did. But here we are." "They made mistakes," she insisted. "They're paying for them. Isn't that enough? Do you have to cut them out of your life completely?" "That's not my decision," I replied. "They made that choice when they decided to exploit me instead of asking for help honestly. When they decided my future was an acceptable sacrifice." I walked away, her angry words following me down the courthouse steps. I understood her anger. Her life had been upended, her children were suffering, and it was easier to blame me than to accept that her husband's actions had caused the destruction of our family. The aftermath of the trial was both liberating and isolating. Many family members stopped speaking to me entirely. Holiday invitations disappeared. I was effectively excommunicated from the family that had once demanded everything from me. The isolation hurt, but there was also relief in it. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly responding to family emergencies, bailing out relatives, or sacrificing my own needs for others. I had time and space to figure out who I was beyond the role of family caretaker. Michael remained steadfastly by my side throughout the ordeal. "I'm proud of you," he told me often. "What you did took incredible courage." Megan organized a small circle of friends who became my chosen family, people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through challenges, and built relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. 6 months after the sentencing, I received my first letter from Ryan in prison. His handwriting was neater than I remembered, filling 3 pages with reflections on his mistakes and the consequences of his actions. "I've had a lot of time to think in here," he wrote. "I've realized that I've been taking advantage of you our entire lives, not just with the identity theft. Mom always made it clear that you were the responsible one, the one who should sacrifice. I learned to expect your help without gratitude. I learned to see you as a resource, not as my sister, who had her own dreams and needs. I'm trying to understand how I became someone who could hurt you so badly. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm truly sorry." I read the letter several times, unsure how to respond or whether to respond at all. There seemed to be genuine reflection in his words, but I had been manipulated by Ryan so many times before. I placed the letter in a drawer, deciding to give myself time before making any decision about our relationship. My mother's letters were different. Though she expressed regret for the misunderstanding that had led to our estrangement, she never took full responsibility for her actions. She continued to frame the situation as a family difficulty that I had escalated unnecessarily. I responded to her first few letters with brief, factual updates on my life, but as it became clear she wasn't capable of genuine remorse, I stopped writing back. As the months passed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I secured a promotion at work, focusing energy previously spent on family drama into my career. I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, one where I felt safe and where no family member had the address. I continued therapy, working through the complex grief of losing my family not to death, but to betrayal. And gradually, I began to heal. The pain didn't disappear, but it became manageable, a dull ache rather than a sharp stab. I learned to trust again, carefully, selectively, but genuinely. I learned that saying no didn't make me selfish or uncaring. It made me someone with healthy boundaries. Most importantly, I learned that family isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by mutual respect, support, and love that builds up rather than tears down. My chosen family might be smaller than the extended network I had lost, but it was infinitely healthier. The Amanda who never said no to family was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to say no. 1 year after Ryan's sentencing, I sat in the office of Dr. Elaine Carter, the therapist who had helped me navigate the aftermath of my family's betrayal. The office was familiar now, the soft blue walls, the comfortable chairs, the small fountain that provided gentle background noise during our sessions. "How are you feeling about the anniversary?" Dr. Carter asked, her kind eyes studying my face for signs of distress. I considered the question carefully. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "There's still sadness, but it's not consuming me anymore. I can think about what happened without feeling like I can't breathe." Dr. Carter nodded approvingly. "You've done remarkable work, Amanda. Not many people could recover from such a profound betrayal with the resilience you've shown." Her words warmed me, but I knew my healing journey hadn't been a solo effort. "I've had help," I said. "Michael, Megan, this therapy, I wouldn't have made it without support." "That's an important realization," Dr. Carter noted. "The difference between unhealthy dependence and healthy interdependence. You've learned to distinguish between people who drain you and people who fill you up." That distinction had been transformative. In the year since the trial, I had carefully rebuilt my life around people who genuinely cared about my well-being, not what I could do for them. My relationship with Michael had deepened into something I hadn't known was possible, a partnership of equals who supported each other's growth rather than enabling destructive patterns. Michael had proposed 3 months earlier, on a quiet evening at home rather than with a grand gesture. "I don't want a big wedding," he had said, understanding my complicated feelings about family occasions. "I just want to build a life with you, however that looks." We were planning a small ceremony for the spring, surrounded only by those who had earned a place in our lives through genuine love and support. My career had flourished as well. With the energy I had previously devoted to family crises, I had earned a significant promotion at my accounting firm. I was now managing my own team, helping clients navigate complex financial situations with empathy and expertise. The skills I had developed through my own financial recovery had given me unique insight into the emotional aspects of money management. My new apartment was in a secured building across town from my old neighborhood. I had decorated it exactly as I wanted, with no consideration for anyone else's preferences or convenience. The spare bedroom was my home office, not a crash pad for relatives. The walls held artwork I loved, not family photos that triggered painful memories.
Dr.
Carter's voice brought me back to the present. Have you had any contact with your mother or brother recently? I sighed, thinking of the letter that had arrived from Ryan the previous week. Ryan still writes regularly. His letters have changed over time. The early ones were still manipulative in subtle ways, but the recent ones seem more genuinely reflective. He's participating in a rehabilitation program in prison, working with a counselor on understanding his behaviors. And how do you feel about that? Dr. Carter asked. Cautiously optimistic, I replied. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again, but I appreciate that he seems to be doing the work to understand what happened. And your mother? I felt the familiar tightening in my chest that accompanied thoughts of my mother. She still doesn't get it. Her letters always circle back to how I've torn apart the family, how I need to forgive and forget. She's under house arrest in the same neighborhood where everyone knows what happened, and I think she's more concerned about the social embarrassment than understanding her role in the crime. Dr. Carter nodded sympathetically. Some people aren't capable of the self-reflection necessary for genuine change. That's not your responsibility to fix. Those words had become a mantra for me over the past year. It wasn't my responsibility to fix my family's problems. It wasn't my duty to sacrifice my well-being for their comfort. I wasn't obligated to forgive people who showed no real remorse. I've been thinking about forgiveness lately, I said, surprising myself with the admission. Not the kind my mother wants, the kind that pretends nothing happened and returns to the old patterns, but the kind that allows me to release some of the anger and move forward with my life. That's a profound distinction, Dr. Carter said. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. It doesn't require you to trust people who have proven untrustworthy. It's something you do for yourself, not for them. I had begun to understand this difference. The anger I had carried had been necessary in the beginning, fueling my courage to stand up for myself and pursue justice. But carrying it indefinitely was exhausting, and ultimately, it kept me tethered to the past. I think I'm ready to forgive them, I said slowly. Not to let them back into my life without significant changes and boundaries, but to release the hold their betrayal has on me. Dr. Carter smiled. That's a powerful step, Amanda. After my therapy session, I met Megan for lunch at our favorite cafe. Our friendship had deepened through the crisis, evolving from casual get-togethers to a profound bond that resembled sisterhood more than any relationship I had with blood relatives. So, guess what? Megan said, as we settled into our usual corner table. I've been invited to join a support group for identity theft victims. They want someone to talk about the emotional impact, especially when family members are involved. I looked at her in surprise. You've been invited? She grinned. Actually, they want you, but I figured I'd float the idea first. It's completely fine if you're not interested. The thought of sharing my experience publicly was both intimidating and intriguing. I'm not sure, I admitted. Wouldn't it be dredging everything up again? Maybe, Megan conceded. Or maybe it would be a way to create meaning from what happened. The group leader mentioned they see a lot of cases like yours, family identity theft, but people rarely talk about the emotional fallout. I considered the idea as we ordered our food. Throughout my ordeal, I had often felt isolated, as if I were the only person experiencing such a profound family betrayal. The statistics I'd later learned told a different story. Family members were among the most common perpetrators of identity theft, precisely because of the access and emotional leverage they possessed. I'll think about it, I promised. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a community center meeting room, sharing my story with a circle of strangers who nodded in understanding rather than judgment. Some had been victimized by siblings, others by parents or children. Each story was unique, but the themes were strikingly familiar. Betrayal, guilt, the struggle to establish boundaries, the grief of losing family relationships. After the meeting, a woman about my age approached me hesitantly. "Thank you for sharing your story," she said. "I'm still in the middle of dealing with my situation. My father used my identity, and hearing how you stood up for yourself gives me hope that I can do the same." Her words stayed with me, lighting a spark that grew in the following months. I began speaking regularly at support groups, then at community workshops on financial safety and family boundaries. I collaborated with a local nonprofit on educational materials about preventing and recovering from identity theft. What had begun as my personal nightmare evolved into a mission to help others navigate similar situations. Meanwhile, my relationship with my blood family remained complicated. Ryan continued to write from prison, his letters increasingly thoughtful and self-aware. 6 months before his earliest possible parole date, he asked if I would consider meeting with him. After lengthy discussions with Michael, Megan, and Dr. Carter, I agreed to a supervised visit. The prison meeting room was stark and impersonal, nothing like the warm family kitchen where we had grown up. Ryan looked older, thinner, his confident demeanor replaced by a cautious humility. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I replied honestly. We talked for an hour, carefully navigating the painful terrain of our shared past and uncertain future. Ryan spoke about his therapy in prison, his growing understanding of the patterns that had led to his crimes. "I've had to face who I really am," he said, meeting my eyes directly. "Not who Mom always told me I was, the golden boy who deserved special treatment, but who I actually became, someone who had hurt his own sister to avoid consequences." The admission was powerful in its simplicity and self-awareness. "I don't expect you to welcome me back into your life when I get out," he continued. "I wouldn't trust me either. But I want you to know I'm working to become someone different, someone better." I left the meeting with mixed emotions, a cautious hope that Ryan was genuinely changing, tempered by the knowledge that real transformation takes years of consistent effort, not just promising words. My mother's journey was different. As her house arrest ended, she increased her efforts to re-establish our relationship on her terms, without the accountability and boundaries I required. When I remained firm in my conditions, acknowledgement of the harm she had caused, respect for my boundaries, no contact with my financial information, she retreated into the familiar narrative that I was the unforgiving daughter who had destroyed the family. I had learned to let her have that story. Her perception of me was no longer the defining factor in my life. I knew who I was. A woman who had faced betrayal with courage, who had rebuilt her life on a foundation of self-respect and healthy relationships, who had transformed her pain into purpose by helping others. 2 years after the sentencing, Michael and I married in a small ceremony in a botanical garden, surrounded by friends who had become family. My Uncle Robert attended, the sole representative of my blood relatives. Ryan, recently released on parole, had been invited but chose not to come, writing that he didn't want to create tension on my special day. I appreciated the consideration, a small sign that perhaps he really was changing. As Michael and I exchanged vows promising to support each other's growth, to communicate honestly, to build a partnership based on mutual respect, I realized how profoundly my understanding of love had transformed. Love wasn't sacrificed to the point of self-destruction. Love wasn't enabling harmful behaviors. Love wasn't accepting mistreatment in the name of family loyalty. True love was reciprocal, building both people up rather than draining one to fill the other. It had healthy boundaries and mutual respect. It was honest, even when honesty was difficult. After the ceremony, Uncle Robert handed me an envelope. "Your father would be so proud of the woman you've become," he said, his eyes suspiciously bright. "He always knew you had this strength in you." Inside the envelope was a letter my father had written to me before his death, entrusted to my uncle, just in case. In it, he apologized for not protecting me better from the family dynamics he had recognized but felt powerless to change. He expressed his pride in my independence and integrity, qualities he had seen in me even as a child. He encouraged me to build a life based on my own values, not the expectations others placed on me. Reading his words, I felt a circle closing. My father had seen me, really seen me, in a way my mother never had. He had recognized the strength I would eventually need to break free from toxic family patterns. That night, as Michael and I danced under strings of garden lights, surrounded by people who loved us for who we were rather than what we could provide, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been painful beyond words, but it had led me here, to this moment of genuine joy and connection. The Amanda who never said no to family was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned to say yes to herself, to healthy relationships, to a life built on authenticity rather than obligation. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately set me free, teaching me the most valuable lesson of all. True family, whether bound by blood or by choice, lifts you up. It doesn't tear you down. For anyone out there struggling with toxic family dynamics, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve relationships that honor your worth, that recognize your humanity, that contribute to your well-being rather than draining it. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for your survival and growth. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to say no. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming family betrayal. And remember, you're not alone in your struggle. There are communities of support waiting to help you through, just as I found mine. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and healing on your own journey toward healthy relationships and self-respect.